Let's get this shit over with.
This is the worst.
Mota Zitabanakasi, welcome into the worst fantasy show. I am your host with the least, Jack Lucenay. It's rough in these fantasy streets with bye weeks and injuries, man. Our teams out here are looking decimated, but that's why I'm here to help you guys. We're going to be going through all the matchups, all of the start sits. And then I extended the streamer list. The streamer list is in full this week to help you guys out. So let's, without any further ado, get into the matchups. So, starting with tonight, we've got Thursday night football between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons. So, all of these matchups, I pulled the over-under information from rotowire.com/cbs.com, kind of mix and match them. But yes, the Buccaneers and Falcons, 43.5 point over-under. So, the real question here now is what to do with the Falcons skill players that were supposed to take a leap. I keep making the joke that the coach Raheem Morris, you were supposed to destroy the Smith, not join them. Because now we're seeing Kyle Pitts has been relegated to nothingness. Drake London has been struggling because Kirk Cousins is struggling. Honestly, it's just it's crazy how bad the Falcons offense has actually been, and I'm not super enthused about this Thursday night matchup, but with all the bye weeks going on, with all the injuries going on, there's really not much you can do. I mean, Lions, Chargers, Eagles, Titans, those are valuable fantasy assets that are going to be not available this week. So Bijan Robinson, you're starting him. I think Tyler Algier might be worth a flex, even though Bijan is playing and supposedly is in full shape. He was limited this week with a hamstring injury. Maybe we see Tyler Algier get more involved. And so if you're really desperate or hard up for a flex play, I don't mind throwing Tyler Algier in there. I think you're forced to play Drake London. I don't know, like if you're trying to galaxy brain the tight end position and play someone like Colby Parkinson or Mike Gesicki or, some really alternative option over Kyle Pitts, I think you just take your lumps with Kyle Pitts. Like, it just feels like he's going to have the blow-up game on your bench, and then you're going to be mad about it, and then you're going to try and play him, and he's going to screw you over again. I really don't have any reasoning to play Kyle Pitts beyond the fact that I feel like everyone is going to bench him, and he's going to have a decent game tonight. It's just one of those icky fantasy feelings that I can't shake. I have him in a couple lineups where I just don't have a real alternative. If that's the case, like that's pretty much where I'm at. Like when I say a real alternative, like on the other side of the ball, a popular streamer is going to be Cade Otton. I mean, Otton's seeing a lot of targets. He's just not doing a whole lot with it. I mean, he seems like a guaranteed 8 points. I think the thing with Kyle Pitts is that I feel like it's 0 or a touchdown and, a top 5 tight end performance on the week because that's how bad tight ends are. At the end of the day, I'm playing Bijan. I'm flexing Tyler Algier if I really have to. I'm playing Drake London. I'm playing Kyle Pitts with 0 confidence, just a hope and a prayer if I don't have other options. I think the Buccaneer side is much more clear where I'm still flexing Rachaad White or playing him as an RB2. I think Bucky Irving is also a viable flex, and especially this week with, again, so many teams that are going to be missing in action, not just by injury, but by bye weeks. And then Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are just in your lineup every week. I understand the K. Dotton thing if you're really hard up and desperate, but that feels like really gross floor with minimal upside, especially because he's very much like, you could argue, the fifth target behind the two running backs and the two wide receivers. And I think Baker Mayfield's in your lineup, and Kirk Cousins is one of those things, like in a super flex, maybe. But generally speaking, Kirk Cousins hasn't been that good. In single quarterback, there's lots of other options I would play above him. Just including like both of the old timers, which we'll get to in a little bit. We got a question in the comments though before we jump. Oh, it's not a question. It's just Albert. What's up, Albert? What's going on? Nice to see you. Thank you so much for stopping in. So yeah, let's jump into these Sunday matchups. We'll get into the 1 p.m. games right after. Actually, sorry, I forgot. We've got this London game, Jets versus Vikings in merry old London. 40-point over-under. That's gross. That's because the Jets offense has been myopic, stagnant, disappointing, and they're not even injured. Like, we saw Breece Hall just have an absolute dud last week out of nowhere. Garrett Wilson has been wildly irrelevant, but they have had tough matchups. Aaron Rodgers still finding his footing. He has survived the first part of the season. I think that's the most important thing, is that Aaron Rodgers is still alive and throwing footballs for this team. And we are in October. So, I mean, as far as the Jets are concerned, I feel like everything's going their way in real life football. It's just not equating to fantasy football, unfortunately. You're still starting Breece Hall. You're still starting Garrett Wilson, especially with all the options are limited this week. You're starting those two guys most likely, unless you just have some jacked up roster in an 8 or 10 man league. Okay, sure. If you have Jordan Mason and Kyron Williams and you can start both of them over Breece Hall, I mean, kudos to you, but most people aren't going to be in that situation. So again, what kind of ancillary player are you willing to play above Breece Hall? Like, to me, the deepest option I would go is maybe Chuba Hubbard, because he's getting all the work for the Panthers. I mean, I wouldn't, again, like when you talk about ancillary or auxiliary players, even if you talk about the Bucs, for example, Rachaad White and Bucky Irving kind of sharing that role right now, I would take Breece Hall and hope for the upside that it hits in this game. And we've seen it kind of more through the receiving work that he's had on the year. He has struggled a lot in the run, but I think this O-line has struggled a lot more than people think too. On the Vikings side, I mean, Sam Darnold revenge game. I think he will have a fine game. I don't think he's going to light up the world for fantasy. Like, I'm expecting like 202 and Aaron Jones to be involved. And I do think the Vikings win this game, but the Jets defense is still really good. So again, I don't think Sam Darnold's going to go crazy or anything, but I think he's going to have a competent game. So for me, I'm really just kind of sticking to very much Justin Jefferson. I think Jordan Addison is viable. And I really like Aaron Jones in this game, actually. I think as much as he was utilized in the Green Bay game, kind of weirdly, I think he'll be sort of utilized similarly in this game with a lot of receiving work out of the backfield because of the Jets' strong front seven. And also, it just feels like the Aaron Rodgers connection, like the camaraderie I could sense. See, like, it's just one of those things of like, I bet pregame or postgame at some point we're going to see Aaron Jones and Aaron Rodgers just kind of chatting it up and kind of reminiscing, maybe walking memory lane a little bit. So I like Aaron Jones to have a good game here in London. All right. The actual 1:00 games. The Carolina Panthers at the Chicago Bears, 41-point over under. The Panthers suddenly look like a qualified NFL team thanks to Daddy Andy Dalton. And I would start Andy Dalton here. Again, depending on what your options are, obviously over any Dolphins quarterback, any Patriots quarterback, any Browns quarterback. Maybe if Jameis pops in, that would be different. But Raiders, Broncos quarterbacks, like, he again, Andy Dalton, very viable. I think you could even get into kind of some questions like, I think Andy Dalton is a better player than Caleb Williams on the other side of the ball. I think Andy Dalton might be a better play this week than Sam Darnold. I think he's a better play than Kirk Cousins. So I think he's a better play than Aaron Rodgers. So it's kind of crazy that Andy Dalton has now. It's funny because, shout out to Around the NFL and Dan Hansis, especially, and Mark Sessler, the two of them together now on Heed the Call podcast, representing Underdog. And when they were with Chris Wessling and Greg Rosenthal back in the day around the NFL, they always used to joke about how Andy Dalton was the prime meridian of NFL quarterbacks, meaning that like he was the epitome of an average NFL quarterback. If you had a quarterback worse than Andy Dalton, your franchise was fucked. And if you had a quarterback better than Andy Dalton, you maybe had a franchise or definitely had a franchise quarterback on your hands. So it's funny that Andy Dalton has now become the prime meridian of fantasy quarterbacks in this year of 2024. Because again, I'm starting him over all secondary and tertiary options. The only quarterbacks I'm starting ahead of Andy Dalton are like superstar quarterbacks. Like, okay, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. You could still argue Patrick Mahomes. Even in that matchup, we'll get to it later, but like I would start Andy Dalton over Derek Carr this week. That's to me a matchup when you're talking about these matchup-based quarterbacks. I'm playing the matchups. I think the Bears are a good matchup here for Andy Dalton. I like Deontay Johnson, assuming that he is able to play. He's dealing with his own injuries now, which is why I super love Xavier Legette. If he is still hanging around on your waiver wires, he is absolutely worth a stash. And if you're desperate, he's even worth a play this week. Just by virtue of kind of being last man alive. But I also think they just really like him. His personality obviously fits with the team. That's why they drafted him. He's a Carolina boy, if I remember right. He had that really great press conference. But I think it's also like he is starting to emerge physically for the team. He had 10 targets, which is definitely something you do not want to ignore. And Andy Dalton lifts all boats on this team. So I think Andy Dalton, Deontay Johnson assuming health, Xavier Legette as a flex, and I love Chuba Hubbard. I think Chuba Hubbard and Jordan Mason this year were really the argument for the zero RB truthers if they managed to get both of those guys on their teams, which I got to say, I have not seen a lot of teams that had both of those players. And then on the Bears side, I think you can go back to the DeAndre Swift this week. It's funny because DeAndre Swift was so irrelevant for the first 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden last week has the huge game. What was the mirage? Was the mirage the first 3 weeks, or was the mirage the huge game last week? I think the truth is somewhere in between. They definitely were facing stiffer defenses, and now they're going to be facing like basically the next 5 games, like 3 or 4 of the teams are bottom 5 in rush defense. So if DeAndre Swift can't be a consistent RB2 flex option through this next couple of weeks, like literally 2 to 4 weeks, then he is going to be someone I would really be actively trying to dump off my roster come mid-season when you're transitioning to try and adjust for the fantasy playoffs. But for right now, I think you stay in the flames with DeAndre Swift. DJ Moore revenge game, but with the routes that Shane Waldron has him running, I don't know how much revenge he's going to find. I mean, 6 targets last week only. That was the lowest of the season. It does seem like Keenan Allen's presence is taking away from some of the target share, but DJ Moore is still very much the one in this offense. Like, he is not like DK Metcalf. This is not me comparing him to DK Metcalf as a wide receiver physically, skill-wise, none of that. Just in terms of when you looked at Shane Waldron's offense with the Seahawks last year, it was like DK was the one guy that was relevant for the most part, kind of grossly consistent because he was seeing 6 to 10 targets every game because he was designated essentially as the wide receiver 1. and that's DJ Moore in this offense. I'm not enthused by it, but I'm still playing DJ Moore. Where I'm out is, I mean, you can try and stream the matchup. Again, if it's very matchup dependent, very league dependent, very much team dependent. If you're just really hard up for you just desperately need to fill a flex spot because you've got guys on bye, guys on IR. I'm fine with O'Doones and Allen, but that's the only way I'm playing them. Like, I'm not actively starting them over. There's a lot of wide receivers I'm starting over those guys. Even in terms of like the Rams wide receivers, like Tutu Atwell, I think is a better play. Just kind of looking across the board quickly, like I think Josh Downs, if Flacco plays, is a better play. So it's just, you know, even though it's the Broncos and the Broncos defense has been really tough, I think Trey Tucker probably also ends up with more fantasy points than either Rome or Keenan Allen in this game again. So yeah, I don't want to start Caleb Williams, and I wouldn't in single quarterback. I would start DeAndre Swift again. I think you're kind of forced to, depending on where you have him and why. Ugh. And then DJ Moore, but what sucks is this feels like it's such a smash spot for DJ Moore. Like, I should be so excited for him, and yet I just know that he's going to be running some stupid ass. It's not even a route tree. It's a route shrub. Like, what the fuck? I hate Shane Waldron. All right, let's move on here. Baltimore Ravens at the Cincinnati Bengals. 49.5 point over under. Probably one of the sexier fantasy games of the week. You're probably just firing up everybody that you can. Even though the Ravens defense is really good, I'm still playing Joe Burrow. I'm still playing Jamar Chase. If I have T. Higgins, which I don't I don't think I have T. Higgins in like any league except for like a dynasty one. But if I have him, I would just take that shot and hope for the upside. I think Yoshavas is a sneaky flex play if you're really desperate. Again, I have some deeper dynasty leagues where I have him stashed and I'm playing him because of bye weeks and injuries. So, you know, in those kind of deeper formats, I don't hate it. I think he could catch a touchdown because, again, just feels like the primary focus is going to be on Chase and Higgins, and maybe he sneaks through and catches a touchdown or two. That's your path to fantasy relevance. Zach Moss and Chase Brown. I'm not chasing the points with Chase Brown, though I am closely monitoring the situation. If Chase Brown can actually emerge past Zach Moss, that does set up potentially a second half of the season breakout. He's someone that I would be trying to target in trades right now, but I actually think that he will cool down a little bit this week. They're still splitting carries with him and Moss. Even if he gets a touchdown, it's not going to be as good as last week, I don't think. And so I think you let him have the week this week and trade for him next week, because I do think that by the second half of the season, like, Zach Moss is fine as a veteran player, but he very much belongs as the backup, and Chase Brown belongs as the starter. I think that's been clear through the first 4 weeks. If you're watching the games and just how explosive Chase Brown looks compared to Zach Moss, I think Zach Moss maybe, again, as a veteran player, has more skills that the team is looking for, especially when it comes to pass blocking. But that's why I actually think their roles could flip by the end of the year, and we see more of a, again, not comparing Chase Brown to Jahmyr Gibbs, just simply the roles that they play in the offense. The way Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery fit into the Detroit Lions offense, I think the Bengals could fit Chase Brown and Zach Moss into similar roles, even though they are not exactly the same types of players as Gibbs or David Montgomery. Like, clearly Gibbs and Montgomery are significantly better. So it's not me comparing the players, it's just me comparing the roles, just to be very clear there. So yeah, sorry, just to recap quickly, Bengals, you start pretty much everybody. I'm not fucking with the tight ends anymore. Eric Hall's fine. He's getting 4 targets a game. That's not enough to eat off of. Mike Gesicki is, pretty much irrelevant. He might pop up for a couple games here, but it's not anything you can rely on. So again, Chase, Higgins, Yoshavas in really deep leagues. Don't mind Zach Moss. If you really want to fuck around with Chase Brown is a flex because you're desperate. I get it, but there's better plays. But he's a trade target for me, again, for the second half of the season. And then on the Ravens side, I mean, that's obvious. It's Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, and no one else. Oh, no, Mark Andrews. What happened? I put out the tweet earlier, like, God help me, I'm starting Mark Andrews and Kyle Pitts in a couple of leagues. I mean, what do you want me to do? I got 26 fucking leagues. I'm not picking up Mike Gesicki to start over him. You know, I'm not starting Tyler Conklin over him. Like these guys that just are very much like I'm praying that they get 8 points. Like I would just take my lumps with Mark Andrews. Like sure, maybe he does go out and get 0 points again. You know what? Those other tight ends aren't getting that much more. Mark Andrews at least has the potential to, he will show up at some point. And given the state of the tight end position, again, it's like, I would have to have a really, like, even Cole Kmet, popular waiver ad. If Keenan Allen's playing, Cole Kmet is irrelevant. So it's like, I would still start Mark Andrews over Cole Kmet. Again, like Tyler Conklin, like Taysom Hill is going to be out. Jawan Johnson and Foster Moreau might be popular streaming options. Like all of those kind of like really base tight ends, like fuck it, just put Mandrews in. Like that's where I'm at. In the places where I still have him, which are few and far between, at least thankfully, just because I wasn't really reaching on Mandrews specifically when I was drafting this year. Yeah, that's one that I feel like I avoided by accident. But again, if I have Mark Andrews, unless I have a much better option, like you know, if it was a tight end premium league and I went crazy tight ends, like, fine, maybe I let him sit on the bench, but he's going to blow up one of these games. And I think this could be a sneaky spot for him to have a decent game. I think I would play Mark Andrews. I mean, you could say all the same things I just said about Isaiah Likely and hope that that week 1 performance pops up too. So he's just as viable. And Zay Flowers is the one that I think has been wildly disappointing. And I said, you know, before the season that I wasn't drafting a lot of him because he wasn't very relevant with Mark Andrews on the field. And we've seen that through this first chunk of the season. So unless Mark Andrews were to get like injured, unfortunately, I think Zay Flowers is going to continue to be largely irrelevant for fantasy. It's like he might boom a couple times here and there, but you're not going to know when it's coming. It's not consistent or viable for a week-to-week winning strategy. So Zay Flowers is someone I'm moving on from. All right, Bills at Texans. The Buffalo Bills at the Houston Texans. 47.5 point over under. This one I'm hoping is a firestorm. I'm hoping the defense is staying home a little bit. I think with the Bills being on the road, that's where I'm hoping potentially for a big shootout. Like the fantasy community needs a 40 to 30 point fucking barn burner. Like this shit needs to smash the over by like 20 points. Like we just, again, as a fantasy community, I think we cathartically need this to be a smash game, and it sets up and presents as one. If Josh Allen can play some hero ball, James Cook can get cooking again, just pepper all the different wide receivers, maybe get Dalton Kincaid going, these elite tight ends, maybe revive them a little bit. I think you just take your shot on. Now, keep an eye out on Khalil Shakir, popped up all of a sudden, I think, with an ankle issue. He might not be available to play. If that happens, Curtis Samuel in deeper leagues again, he's been basically irrelevant. If Shakir was not there, I think he would see at least some volume, like gross volume, floor volume, but again, really deep kind of streaming flex play. But primarily speaking, I'm just starting Josh Allen, Dalton Kincaid, James Cook, moving on. And then on the Texans side, it's for me, this is CJ Stroud, Nico Collins. That's locked into my lineup every single week. I love Stephon Diggs here in the revenge spot. I've been taking a lot of him in my DFS lineups. If Joe Mixon returns, I would play him. If he does not, I'm not. I think we've seen enough of the Cam Akers, Dare Ogunbowale experience to know that, like, you're not getting more than 5 to 10 fantasy points out of that. If that's all you need, by all means. But again, it's not what I'm prioritizing. So for me, this is Stroud, Collins, Diggs, end of list. And that's because Dell, I think, is still struggling with his own injuries. Even if he plays in this game, I think we've seen the pecking order has been very much Nico 1, Diggs 2, Dell 3. So I'm playing it like that till I see something else. Colts at Jaguars. Indianapolis Colts at the Jacksonville Jaguars. 46-point over under. That feels high with how the Jaguars are playing. Now, Anthony Richardson has been at practice. Supposedly, there is a chance that he plays in this game. I think that would be incredibly fucking stupid for this team to do. Not only would it be incredibly fucking stupid because he is clearly a much worse quarterback in terms of just throwing the football, which is, the primary job of the quarterback, than Joe Flacco. Old man Flacco, who said he was like 10 days older than Anthony Richardson's mom, which is kind of a weird flex and, factoid. But I mean, Anthony Richardson looks like fucking dog shit. He looks like hot dog water. Like, he looks like he can't hit the broadside of a barn, this guy. Like, if it's not 70 yards down the field, like, motherfucker is, you need a 15-yard out route? Let me throw it fucking 30 yards over the guy's head. Like, Jesus Christ. It's got no accuracy. This guy's completing like less than 50% of his passes. He's only attempting like 19 passes. You can't do anything with that in terms of fantasy, in terms of the passing receiving options. If Anthony Richardson plays, Michael Pittman, dead. Josh Downs, dead. Alec Pierce and Adonai Mitchell, like, maybe they catch a 70-yard touchdown. Cool. You can't rely on that. And I frankly wouldn't play Anthony Richardson in this game if he plays. If Anthony Richardson plays, I don't think he makes it through the whole game. I know the Jaguars defense has not been great. They have really underwhelmed. This is definitely feeling like a bit of a get-right spot for the Jaguars. I mean, after starting 0-4 with a division rival coming in, if Anthony Richardson starts this game banged up, I am staying far away from it. I'm not fucking around with any Colts options if Anthony Richardson plays. And because the problem is, even if Flacco comes in, it's like we saw last week, okay, Flacco came in and had like 150 and 2 touchdowns, but if he doesn't get the whole game, then it's really capping your ceiling with Flacco and therefore with the receiving options. And again, it's like, well, now you're praying that Anthony Richardson gets injured. That's not how I like to play fantasy football. So for me, this is very much dependent on if the team is smart, which I think they will be. I don't expect Anthony Richardson or Jonathan Taylor to play here. I would expect this to be Joe Flacco and Trey Sermon. I would start both of them in that scenario. I would start Michael Pittman in that scenario, and I would start Josh Downs in that scenario. And then on the Jaguars side, really like Brian Thomas Jr., still waiting for the true breakout. Colts have been terrible against outside wide receivers, so I think he could have a huge day here. I would still play Christian Kirk, though if Evan Ingram is back, I won't feel as good about it. And if Evan Ingram is back, he's going back in my lineup because tight ends have been fucking abysmal. And I've held on to him this long that I feel obligated. And then Travis Etienne still dealing with a shoulder injury. I would just start him. If he's healthy and he plays, even if it's somewhat on a limited basis, I'm going to take the shot on the efficiency of Etienne. Like even last week, even with the shoulder injury, when you actually looked at how the game ended, he had like 11 carries for 60 yards. He wasn't that bad, to be perfectly honest. And I know Tank Bigsby has looked decent too, and has looked good even. But I think people are really get really overblown or really take it out of context, like these RBBCs. If the RBBC is just 2 guys, like that's totally viable in today's NFL. Like if they're splitting 500 opportunities and one guy's getting 300 and one guy's getting 200, like, yeah, both guys are going to be viable plays for fantasy. That first guy, you would hope for efficiency and that he ends up being kind of an RB2 with RB1 upside. And then the other guy's a flex play. Like that's totally viable. And I mean, literally, like the Detroit Lions are doing it week in and week out, where both Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery are finishing as top 12 running backs. Like, it is possible. It doesn't happen as often because it requires two talented running backs with kind of varying skill sets and a great offensive line and a good offense. And like, so those things don't always coalesce together very often. But like, the Jaguars, in theory, are a team built to do that. Like, if you think about it, like, again, ETN fits in the Gibbs role, Bigsby fits in the Montgomery role. They could theoretically both exist and be viable on the field at the same time. So that all that to say that, again, I would play ETN, and I think even in a really dirty, desperate flex spot, I don't mind Bigsby here. Especially if you have any players in this next game. Miami Dolphins at the New England Patriots. A lovely 36.5 point over-under. Oh, my sweet baby Jesus. The Miami Dolphins skill players. Pour one out for the Miami Dolphins skill players. This is shuffling chairs on the Titanic at this point. This is the band is playing and the ship is sinking, and the only one that can save us is Tua Tagovailoa. Because holy fucking hell, Tyler Huntley with all of 95 passing yards last week. It ain't getting much better, guys. I'm telling you, Tyler Huntley is who he is. What he did last week, that was prime Tyler Huntley. That's what he does. I think his career high is like 200 passing yards. Like, it's not. I don't think he's ever had 300 passing yards in his career. I'd have to vet that, but it's like, if he has, he's only done it like a handful of times. It's not a routine thing. For him, 150 with 50 rushing yards and a tutty, that's a Tyler Huntley mainstay. So as long as he is the quarterback for this team, you can take the shot on Tyreek Hill. You can hope he breaks a long play, but if he doesn't, it's 8 points at the most. I wouldn't fuck with Jalen Waddle right now because Jalen Waddle's whole thing is, being an upgraded Jarvis Landry in a sense of being able to soak in targets. So it's like, if he doesn't catch a touchdown, he is going to be wholly irrelevant. Devon Achane even, like, none of this offense can get going with the current quarterbacks that they have set up. I think it's egregious, some of these teams, and the way that they just don't have fucking viable backup quarterbacks. Like, just looking at the Indianapolis Colts, like, yeah, they had Anthony Richardson, and they were like, you know what, we're going to need a decent backup quarterback. Let's go sign Joe Flacco. Like, the Miami Dolphins knew that Tua had concussion issues. They very well could have gotten a Joe Flacco, a Jameis Winston, an Andy Dalton, some type of viable backup quarterback that, your whole team doesn't fucking sink when the quarterback goes down. And again, it's an egregious dereliction of duty, in my opinion, on the part of the GM. So ideally, you're not starting any Dolphins players, but you probably have to start Tyreek Hill. On the Patriots side, like, I think this thing with Ramondre Stevenson about how they're talking shit about how he's going to lose his job feels like complete bullshit. This feels like coach speak. This feels like the coach trying to get in his head. And doesn't it just feel like the type of game where Ramondre is going to come out for like 25 carries for 150 yards and a tutty or two, and he's going to be the reason that the Patriots win this game, and then the coach is going to be like, oh, well, we were just trying to motivate him. That's one of those like real life NFL kind of storylines that I end up telling myself that I feel like I sometimes prioritize over just like the metrics of fantasy football, what the guy's been doing and like what the coach speak is. That thorough line, I'm really struggling with getting off of that. I feel like Ramondre is going to have a good game here. I will say, in the league that I have him, I don't have a choice. I'm playing him. In fact, that league, it's Scott Fishwell. I'm down so bad in that league between bye weeks and injuries. Like, I've got Pacheco on IR. I've got Tua on IR. Fucking, like, all my Chargers and Eagles and, like, everyone's on bye week. It seems like half my team, like literally my whole bench, I think I have like 7 bye weeks and 2 or 3 IRs or people out. Like, it's crazy. So I'm playing Ramondre and Antonio Gibson in that league just to give you a purview into how bad some people have it this week. So if you're not in a situation like that, just, feel good. All right. Cleveland Browns at the Washington Commanders. 43.5 point over under here. I actually think this is going to hit the under. This feels like a shitty, gross game. I know the Commanders are rocking and rolling. The Browns are just good enough of a defense to maybe slow them up a little bit here. I don't have a lot of faith in the Browns. I mean, I'm still playing Amari Cooper. It hasn't been great. Last week was complete fucking bullshit. Last week broke me. The Amari Cooper 82-yard touchdown that got called back on the bullshit holding call broke me. Because it's one thing that we're already dealing with injuries at what seems to be like an unheard of and unseen level in the history of the NFL. It just feels like more players have been injured, not just this year, but going back to last year as well. That more players, and maybe it's just because it's been the ones that are significant for fantasy, but more players it feels like have been getting injured the last couple of years, missing games overall. That could also be part of protocols and teams just being safer, players, not playing through the kind of shit that they would have played through in the early 2000s. So I think that, football culture kind of plays a part of it. But when you just have the zebras, the refs fucking up calls like that, and there's just no recourse to hold them accountable and be like, again, it's such a simple thing. I don't understand how it can't just go back to New York and like the call comes in and they say, hey, no, you fucked up, buddy. You got to pick up your laundry and you fucking go tell those people that you fucked up the call and actually that's a touchdown. Like, it should be that simple. And that one especially is like, bro, an 82-yard touchdown that you pull off the board with a fucking bullshit holding call, you have changed the outcome of that game, fundamentally speaking. Not just because of the touchdown that you pulled off the board, but the momentum of an 80-yard touchdown to take that away from that team, and especially Amari Cooper, who had been, kind of struggling through the first couple of weeks in terms of like he was literally like fifth in the NFL in targets, but he was like really struggling with his catch efficiency. And then last week had a good game, and now you're against your old team in the Raiders, and you have that fucking moment, and to have that taken away from you, I felt dejected as a fan. I couldn't imagine being the player in that moment. And it was just like, the NFL is wasting my time with these bullshit kickoff rules that are shortening fields and shortening games and shortening yards and shortening fantasy points. And meanwhile, I can't get the fucking holding calls right. I'm so sick of this shit. And it ruins the product. Between that and the injuries, I've been feeling it more this year where just the NFL product feels down. And fantasy football hasn't felt quite as fun this year as it has in the past. So, shout out to my guy who put a tweet out about that. But like, I feel like I've been trying to play through that. And this week, especially, I feel like, it's like, okay, it's week 5. And I will say, I was doing some research for an article that I'm kind of working on. I don't know if I'm going to get all the way to actually finishing the damn thing, but one of the things I was looking at is that, yeah, injuries have increased over the first 4 weeks because in an average NFL year, there's something like 60-ish players that potentially that will tear their ACL, unfortunately. And actually about 40% of that usually happens in training camp and preseason because it makes sense. Those players are coming off of essentially cold periods and ramping up training. And so that's where you're seeing kind of a lot of those injuries occur. The bulk of them actually occur in the beginning of the season. And yeah, it's not impossible that you're going to see more throughout the season. Obviously, they're still at risk, but because the human body gets used to it by the time they're through the second half of it. So it's like we used to see a lot more of these injuries, it feels like, in training camps and in preseasons because they were so much more intense back in the day, even again going just to 2010 and before. And so now, because the players aren't, first of all, practicing in as much of a rough shape in those early training camp and preseason days, it's like the ramp up usually happens later. The preseason's a little bit shorter, so it feels like some of that's now bleeding into the beginning of the regular season. And it just feels like dodging landmines through the first 4 weeks. It's like this is why redraft leagues so commonly held their drafts after the preseason was over, because we used to see so many injuries in the preseason would fuck up your league. And it's like now we're seeing it happen, but it's because it's happening in the first weeks 1 to 4 of the NFL season. So that might be something that just overall fantasy players need to be mindful of and adjusting to going forward. But yeah, we got real off track there. Let's get back to the fucking matchup. Basically, that was a long-winded way of saying I'm still starting Amari Cooper because he had an 80-yard touchdown that should have counted last week. And this Manders defense isn't the best. But it's him. I'm still starting Jerome Ford. I don't know why Stefanski just refuses to give this man the volume, even though he is very clearly the best running back on the team, averaging 5 yards a carry. Just it seems like he gets to 12 touches. He's like, nope, no, I'm off for you. So I don't know what the fuck that is, but I'm still starting Jerome Ford. I'm starting Amari Cooper. Not starting Njoku if he's back the first week. I'll wait a week or two to see him back full health before I just throw him in my lineup. But yeah, I think Cooper and Ford, that's about it for me. And then on the other side of the ball, I mean, Jane Daniels, Terry McLaurin, and it seems like now Brian Robinson Jr. has popped up on injury list, which fucking sucks because he's been killing it this season. So he's injured, has not been practicing. Austin Eckler has been practicing. He's coming out of concussion protocol. So it seems like it's flipping where now Brian Robinson might not be available and Austin Eckler might be available. If one or the other of them, or especially if both of them are not available, 7-year journeyman and 7-year breakout Jeremy McNichols, who had 2 touchdowns last week, might be worth a really deep flex play. All right, let's move to the 4 p.m. games. The Las Vegas Raiders at the Denver Broncos. Oh, this is a fucking brutal one. Oh, shit. We've got a bunch in the chat. Sorry, I didn't see that, guys. I'll get to those questions in a sec after this matchup. Raiders at Broncos, 36-point over-under here. This sucks. I mean, the problem is I don't think you can play Jacoby Myers because I'm assuming that now that Devontae Adams is not playing, that Jacoby Myers is going to be the one that draws Pat Surtain. Unless for some reason Pat Surtain goes on Brock Bowers, which would be really weird, but I would not count that out. But I'm assuming that Surtain will play between Myers and Bowers. At some point, one of them is going to see him. So I think where I'm going with it is Trey Tucker. I think Trey Tucker is a nice flex play. And I'm not fucking with the running backs, especially because the Broncos defense has been really good. It feels like so long ago that the Dolphins scored 70 points because now they've been really good, the Broncos defense. So I wouldn't mess with that. And I don't think there is an offensive player besides Cortland Sutton on the Broncos that you can trust week to week. And Sutton even is like a low end, like wide receiver 3 play. So I just would try and ignore this game if I can. All right, let's go into some of these questions. Do I trade Moss and Chubb for Jamar? I'm assuming that's Zach Moss and Nick Chubb for Jamar Chase. 1,000,000% I would do that. Especially if you're just taking advantage of a team that is desperate for running backs, that's a huge win. I would much rather have Jamar Chase than either of those players. That's not even close for me. Jawan Jennings or Jacoby Myers. I'm staying in the flames with Jawan Jennings this week because I think George Kittle is going to miss. And like I just mentioned, I think if Jacoby Myers starts to get going at all against the Broncos, they're just going to put Pat Surtain on them, and that could end up shutting them down. So I love Jacoby rest of season. I do not love him this week against the Broncos. I have to start Rachaad White or Bucky Irving tonight as my RB2. Which do you prefer in full PPR? Oh, man, that's a tough one. I think I'm still going with Rachaad White by default. even though Bucky Irving has looked better in full PPR, I feel like White is still getting more of the receiving work. And Bucky is kind of coming in like Bucky last week. He had like 10 for 60 and a tutty, but he only had the one target, if I remember, or one catch, anyways. I think White still had like 2 to 3 catches, but White has looked not very good. Oh man, my gut still says Rachaad White for floor. If you really need the upside ceiling play, I think steel underpants Bucky Irving. I don't hate it. Like if you're the rest of your lineup all looks really consistent, kind of like solid plays as opposed to like, if you got like really boomy, busty type of guys, like T. Higgins, for example. Like if your wide receivers are T. Higgins and Amari Cooper, where I'm like, damn, those guys could get like 20 or 5, like that's where I think I would try the floor with Rachaad White. But if you have like DK Metcalf and Chris Godwin, that's where I think I would go with Bucky Irving. So just kind of giving the reasoning there. Rest of season, would you rather have James Conner or David Montgomery? I'm 3-1 and getting offered A-Shane for one of them. I can withstand the non-Tua weeks. Yeah, I don't mind shipping off James Conner. I really love James Conner. I think he's got a tough matchup this week against San Fran. I think just in general, that offense kind of weirdly still finding themselves. And James Conner is, I don't think ever in his career played a full 17-game season. Maybe this is the first time he does it. But if I'm picking between these two guys, I mean, David Montgomery has just been so consistent. His role is lock, stock, rock solid with the Lions. Like, I'm sticking with Montgomery. Yeah, I think if I was going to trade one of these two, it would be James Conner, and I would do it for A-Shane. That's how I'm looking at it. Brock Purdy or Baker Mayfield this week. I'm going with Purdy-licious. Shout out to you, the Joker, by the way. We started this channel originally as the Fantasy Joker. But yeah, I'm going with Brock Purdy. He just spanks the Cardinals. I think he averages like 30 fantasy points a game against the Cardinals. He's going to smash them. I don't think that's close. All right, start 3. Drake London, Stephon Diggs, Brandon Ayuk, George Pickens, Brian Thomas Jr. I'm going with the Diggs revenge game. I'm going with George Pickens, and I'm going with BTJ breakout against the Colts. I don't like Drake London tonight. And Brandon Ayuk at this point, I need to fucking see it to believe it. Like, bro, you got your money. Now go produce. Jawan Jennings is out producing you. I saw the meme where it's Tiger Woods and then I forget the dude's name. He's wearing the silly outfit in the golf. Fucking John Daly. No, that's not it. I'm not a golfer, not a golf guy. But anyways, it's like some dude in a crazy outfit. And it's like Tiger Woods is Brandon Ayuk with his fucking $70 million contract. And the other dude is Jawan Jennings, who's out producing him. So, yeah, I need to see it to believe it, like I said. So, give me Diggs, Pickens, and BTJ there. Pick 2, T. Higgins, Amari Cooper, or Wandale. Oof. If it's full PPR, I'm going to take Wandale and Amari Cooper because that's going to give me a floor play and a ceiling play. I think Amari Cooper obviously has the better matchup against the Commanders, and he's the clear wide receiver 1, whereas T. Higgins, tougher matchup against the Ravens. Jamar Chase still there. And Wandale, Malik Neighbors probably not going to play. Wandale is going to see like 1 million targets. So he might catch 12 passes for 50 yards, but that's going to be 12 fantasy points in full PPR. If it's standard or half, I think that's where I'm just going to go with. I think I'm going with Cooper and Wandale no matter what. I want a ceiling play and I want a floor play. I think that's what I'm doing. Bench 1, Olave, London, or Deontay Johnson. So obviously monitor the Deontay Johnson injury news. Assuming that he gets a full practice in and he plays in full, then I want Deontay Johnson on the field. And then I would go with Chris Olave next. I do think Drake London could be okay tonight, but it's not a great matchup. The Bucs defense is tougher than people think. Todd Bowles also famously started as a defensive backs coach. So not that like any one guy is a shutdown corner, but just in general, their defense is decent. Like I don't perceive Drake London as having like a monster game against them. Yeah, I think I'm going Olave and Deontay. Again, assuming health for Deontay. And then what's up, Baker or Love? Ooh, that's a tough one, but I'm going with Jordan Love. He's got the better matchup against the Rams. I don't know that he's going to be chasing points like he was last week. I know he threw for like 400 yards last week because he was coming from behind. I don't think that's going to be the case, but I think the Rams are good enough to push him to 2-3 touchdowns, and I think Baker is going to have about the same tonight. I think Love has a little bit more upside and a better matchup, so I'm going with Love. No, I appreciate you guys, and thank you, Chris and Liam. Thank you guys for being here, honestly, and dropping some questions. Always makes the show go better. If you guys super kick that subscribe and like button, we're here every Thursday and every Sunday to answer questions like this. So let's wrap up some of these matchups, and then let's get the hell out of here so we can go watch some football. We were at Cardinals at 49. The Arizona Cardinals at the San Francisco 49ers, 49.5 point over under. I'm starting Kyler Murray. I'm starting Marvin Harrison Jr., and I'm starting James Conner. I think Trey McBride should be back for this game. I'll put him in my lineup because of how bad tight ends are. If he is held out for another week, I think you can go back to the Dortch well. Greg Dortch is a very base, low-level PPR play for deeper leagues. But I think he might get used a little bit more in a tougher matchup here with the 49ers. Kyler might be feeling a little bit rushed, looking for those intermediary throws. That's where the Dortch lives. So I think we could see a little bit more of the Dortch this game. But primarily speaking, I'm just trying to stick to Kyler and MHJ, James Conner, and Trey McBride. And also I'm tempering my expectations for all of them because this is a tough matchup. On the 49ers side, George Kittle, he's not practicing this week. I think he's going to miss this game also. He's been dealing with injuries on and off all season. So I'm assuming he misses. That means I think Deebo Samuel's going to have a really good game. Brandon Ayuk, fucking show it to me at this point. If you can't do it against the Arizona Cardinals, I don't know what's going on anymore, especially if Kittle's not on the field. I tried. I thought last week would be the Ayuk starting to look like Ayuk game, and it wasn't. Maybe I was a week early on that. Maybe it's this week. But I feel like at this point I kind of need to see it to believe it. I'll play him above really tertiary options. So it's if you're asking me Brandon Ayuk or the Dortch, okay, fine, Brandon Ayuk. But someone was asking, we actually hit one in the chat. Where was it? Okay, no, we didn't have it. But actually, the person who asked Olave, London, or Deontay Johnson, I have all three of those guys above Brandon Ayuk as it stands right now. So if you had one of those options, okay, sure. Amari Cooper even, okay, sure. If you ask me T. Higgins, Wan'Dale Robinson level, okay. Maybe I'll stick with Ayuk. Oh, actually, sorry, I found the guy's question. It was this guy, JJ Keith. Shout out to you. Thank you for your question. But just going back to it as an example, clearly really good options here. He had Stephon Diggs, George Pickens, and BTJ as very viable wide receiver options. I see them as on the same level as Brandon Ayuk right now. That's where I'm okay, I don't mind sitting Ayuk. Maybe he has the good week on my bench this week, but now I know going forward it should be a little bit more consistent maybe. So that's kind of how I'm looking at that. But if you're asking me again, compared to a lot lower levels, especially Greg Dortch, Tutu Atwell, any kind of streaming options, yeah, I'm gonna stick with Ayuk. All right. Green Bay Packers at Los Angeles Rams, 48.5 point over under. This is the one where you fire up everybody. It just feels like Packers defense is good, but they're better at home. The Rams defense is just full of holes right now. So is their offense. So the way I prioritize the wide receivers, for me, it's Tutu Atwell and then Jordan Whittington. I like Tutu Atwell as more of a boomy busty play. I think you can take Demarcus Robinson as a deep flex also, but be aware that that's very much like you're hoping for the long touchdown or the long play or nothing at all. Stafford is borderline for me. That's one where it's like I would rather play I would rather play Joe Flacco if he plays. I would rather play Andy Dalton. Like those kind of options I think are above Stafford, but I would play him above again like Minshew, Knicks, Watson, Dolphins quarterback, Patriots like that kind of level. So I really think he's a middling option. In a super flex, you might be tied to him, and I get it, but in single quarterback, there's probably better options. But yeah, I love Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams has been an active trade target of mine. It feels like even though he's just been producing, people are just kind of bored with him or they just don't like him. I don't know what it is. They just think it's going to go away or something. He's like all they've got right now. The whole offense is going through Kyren Williams. Blake Corum has been irrelevant. And he's on waivers in a lot of places. So if you can manage to trade for Kyren, you can still pick up Corum and just have both just in case. But for the most part, I've just been targeting Kyren. Especially any team where I look and they're running back rich and I'm running back needy and I have wide receivers to spare. It's like, oh, fuck yeah, I'm targeting Kyren Williams like crazy. All right. Where the fuck was I? Oh, yeah, Kyren Williams. So, yeah, I would love playing Kyren Williams, obviously. Colby Parkinson in like the deepest of leagues, if you just need 5 to 8 points, fine. But like, really, I'm trying to just play Kyren Williams here. And, if I have to play Tutu Atwell or Jordan Whittington in deeper leagues, I'm okay with it. I'm not enthused, but they're viable flex options for me. And then on the Packers side, fire up Jordan Love, fire up Jaden Reed, fire up Dontavian Wicks, very popular waiver ad. I think Tucker Kraft is a great streamer here. And I don't love Josh Jacobs, but I would definitely play him if you have him. Like, you would have to have some crazy fucking options ahead of him. Like, you would literally have to have like Derek Henry, Kenneth Walker level plays to sit him. But otherwise, Jacobs going to be in your lineup, and you just hope it's a Jacobs game where he gets into the end zone. All right, I do see the questions in the chat. I'm just going to hit this last game for the afternoon games, and then I'll take the questions, and then we can wrap things up here. So Green Bay Pack. No, I just said that. Sorry, Giants at Seahawks. New York Giants at Seattle Seahawks, 43.5 point over under here. Seahawks, I'm playing DK. I'm playing JSN, and in deeper leagues, I'm playing Tyler Lockett. Kenneth Walker, obvious smash play. On the Giants side, yeah, good luck. Neighbors and Singletary are probably going to miss this game. Neighbors with the concussion issue. Singletary popped up with a groin issue, has not been practicing. Again, if you're super desperate and you need a streamer, Tyrone Tracy, Wan'Dale Robinson. But otherwise, like, I love Seahawks defense in this matchup because I think if you take away Malik Neighbors and Devin Singletary from Daniel Jones and you leave him with the options that he had last year, yeah, this could be a rough one. But yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at for that game. All right, we got some questions in the chat. Should I trade Waddle and Judy for Garrett Wilson? No. Garrett Wilson has been awful. I mean, Waddle and Judy. Oh, I said no really fast. It's full PPR. Jalen Waddle obviously is not going to have Tua for at least like the next couple of weeks. Jerry Jeudy to me is basically irrelevant unless Jameis Winston takes over this team. If I do actually, you know what? I said no really quickly, but I'm going to disagree with myself. I think I would make this trade. I would make this trade for two reasons. One, I like the rest of your wide receivers. I like that you specified that you have Justin Jefferson, Nico Collins, Deontay Johnson, T. Higgins. To me, that means I can take Garrett Wilson here And I can afford to like wait for the truer breakout, see those targets kind of start to come up, see if he gets more involved in the offense. Now, the problem is if Devontae Adams gets traded there, Garrett Wilson, I think, I don't know if he becomes irrelevant, but he definitely gets relegated to a much lesser role, and he will perceivably have a lot less fantasy value. That's my big concern right now. And then it's like, well, if you do that, then Jalen Waddle is going to be the one that becomes relevant when Tua comes back, and you're going to be stuck with the irrelevant piece in Garrett Wilson. So that's why I think initially my gut instinct was no. If you really believe that even if Devontae's traded there, that Garrett Wilson can have the breakout in the second half of the season, I don't mind making the trade because it'll open up a spot for you to work some waiver magic. But otherwise, I think I'm holding Waddle and Judy. I feel like I went really back and forth there, but I think ultimately it's like I want to see Devontae get traded first before I accept this trade. Because if Devontae goes to the Jets, I really feel like that could potentially nuke Garrett Wilson's value. Should I trade Sam Darnold, David Montgomery, and Drake London for Justin Jefferson? Oh man, that's a lot to give up. I've got running back depth, but I'm hurting at wide receiver after Cup and Rice injuries. Yeah, I got a couple of teams like that too. I need to move a running back for wide receiver. Kamara, Jacobs, Hubbard, Hunt, Bigsby, Checo on IR, Reed, Myers, Sutton, and Whittington. Targets. Yeah, I mean, targets are tough. People are holding on to running backs like life and death right now. I got to tell you that much. So the problem I have, I feel like you're giving up so much. Sam Darnold. If it's a single quarterback league, I guess I don't give a shit about Darnold. And really, I'm trading Montgomery. I'm going to try and say I'm trading Montgomery and London for Jefferson. Yeah, I probably would do that, to be honest. Yeah, the problem with Chuba Hubbard, I think Chuba Hubbard maybe goes away, but you have Kamara and Jacobs. Pacheco comes, by the time Chuba will go away, and I don't mean he goes away completely, but like obviously when Jonathan Brooks comes in, that's going to relegate him somewhat. So I'm looking at it like by the time Chuba maybe gets relegated, Pacheco should be back. And then I would have Kamara, Jacobs, and Pacheco. And so yeah, I would do that trade, I think. Again, this is assuming it's a single quarterback. If it's super flex, that's too much. Sam Darnold makes it too much in his super flex. If it's a single quarterback, I don't give a shit. I'll pick up another streaming quarterback between like Dalton. Oh yeah, okay, here we go. Here's the rest of his team. Lamar Jackson. Who the fuck is K9? Is that Kaylin Williams? Is that who that is? Saquon, Aaron Jones, Amon-Ra, BTG. Oh yeah, yeah. I'm making that trade all day. This seems like I hate when people are dicks. Like, what are you playing, a 6-man league? No, but this looks like possibly a 10-man. Oh, Kenneth Walker. Okay, yeah. No, I would do this trade. So it seems like you are potentially in like a 10 to 12 man, or at least some kind of keeper or dynasty or something with this kind of roster, because you definitely are stacked. And if I'm stacked like this, that's where I'm definitely moving auxiliary pieces to get a superstar like a Justin Jefferson. And because you have Lamar Jackson, again, assuming this is single quarterback, 10 man. Yeah, all right. So again, assuming it's single quarterback, you have Lamar Jackson. You don't need Sam Darnold. He's irrelevant. So you're trading Drake London and David Montgomery for Justin Jefferson, and you're also opening up room on your roster to go make waiver moves. 100% would do that. That's actually how I play most of the time. And then I didn't want to skip Yee's other question here. Collins, Higgins, JSN, Deontay, Waddle, Judy, full PPR. Oh yeah, we already covered that. Which ones would I play out of these? I mean, if I'm I'm starting Nico, T. Higgins, and JSN. Or sorry. Nico. Ooh, fuck. Okay. Nico, JSN, and Deontay. Obviously, if Deontay's hurt, then I'll go with Higgins. I just think this could be a really good JSN week. All right, we'll get into the last couple of matchups. If anyone drops any more questions, I'll hit them after the streamers at this point so that we can get the show on the way before Thursday night football kicks off here. So our last two matchups, Sunday night, Dallas Cowboys at my Pittsburgh Steelers, 44 points over under. This is a great spot for Justin Fields. Fields has looked pretty good, and with his running ability, I actually love him as a quarterback option this week, especially because the Dallas Cowboys just put why can't I remember the dude? DeMarcus Lawrence. They just put him on IR, and they're dealing with a lot of injuries. So I think the Cowboys defense can definitely be had. I like Justin Fields. I like George Pickens. Even though he looked like shit last week, because Jalen Warren and Cordell Patterson are banged up and not super likely to play, I think you stick Najee Harris back in and hope for the best. He's at least been getting some like receiving work to kind of mitigate being a complete disaster. And then Freiermuth, you stick into your lineup. On the Cowboys side, that's the easiest. It's I don't fuck with their running backs. For me, it's Dak, CD, Jake Ferguson, end of list. On to Monday night, the New Orleans Saints at the Kansas City Chiefs, 43.5 point over under. This actually feels gross. If I'm hoping I'm wrong, but it feels like it's going to hit the under. Just the way the Chiefs have been playing, the way the Saints have been playing, feels like both teams are going to try and lean on defense and the run. And it just feels, doesn't this feel like a game that ends 20-17? You know what I'm saying? But I think you're stuck playing Mahomes, Kelsey for the most part. I like Xavier Worthy just as pure upside play. Like, they got to use him at this point. And we've kind of seen like he can do the long touchdown, but he can also do gadget shit. So he could end up running one in. I like Xavier Worthy a lot. He's someone also I would actually be trying to trade for before he really starts blowing up. Especially because there was a small window where now Rashee Rice is on IR, but there was a small window where for like 3 days they weren't delivering any injury news, and people were talking about like, oh, Rashee Rice maybe comes back in 2-3 weeks, and it's like people think that good, go trade for Xavier Worthy, go trade for Travis Kelce in redraft, because I don't think that injury looks fucked. Even if he is able to come back in theory in 2 to 3 weeks, it's going to take 4 to 6 in my estimation. I think the team's going to be more careful, especially the Chiefs. They're going for the three-peat. There's no reason to rush him back in the regular season. They'll wait until he's good for the playoffs. So, yeah, Mahomes, Kelsey, Worthy, and then on the Saints side, Olave. I would not play Derek Carr. I just don't think he's going to have a very good like fantasy game is the problem. I think this ends up being like, a touchdown to Olave. Kamara runs one in, couple field goals maybe. Like, I'm not super enthused, but I would play Kamara and Olave, and that's pretty much it. Again, in a super pinch, like super flex leagues, I would play Derek Carr over like really auxiliary options, but that's about it. All right, let's get into the streamers. If I can find the drop for it, Jesus Christ.
Don't tell me. We're about to go over a huge waterfall.
Yep.
Sharp rocks at the bottom?
Most likely.
Bring it on.
I do see that one question in the chat. If you guys have any questions you want to drop in the chat, drop them in now. I will hit them right after the streamers before we get out of here to go watch some footy. But yes, our streamers of the week, starting with the quarterbacks. It's the old men, Andy Dalton and Joe Flacco. Obviously, if Flacco plays, he's set up to smash against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have struggled mightily on defense. I think he has a plethora of options in terms of Pittman and Downs and working some of those other options like Pierce and Adonai Mitchell. Like they have a decent amount of depth at wide receiver, and they have a couple usable tight ends. It's just that Anthony Richardson hasn't been able to unlock any of them. So I would trust in Joe and Andy Dalton here. Excuse me. For running back, I'll went deep dive for you guys. Tyrone Tracy is going to be a hot ad, obviously, with the Devin Singletary news. He's available widely in a lot of leagues. I went and picked him up in a bunch of my leagues today where I needed him. So that's more of a surface level, but getting real deep with it. Dare Ogunbowale for the Houston Texans. If Joe Mixon misses again, and he's going to split between him and Cam Akers, in PPR leagues, Ogunbowale is the one getting all the receiving work out of the backfield. He is worth, again, if you are desperate in a deep PPR league, I wouldn't mind throwing him in my flex. But I think Jeremy McNichols potentially chasing those points from last week. Again, uniquely if Brian Robinson or Austin Eckler either of them were to miss. It feels like Brian Robinson is tracking the miss, Eckler's tracking the play. But concussions shit, you never know. If suddenly both of them are unavailable, McNichols is going to step into a really weird, like, one-time only streaming spot here. So I might stash him just to see what happens this weekend. Wide receiver, not quite as deep. Tutu Atwell and Jordan Whittington, both widely available to add as a wide receiver 3 or flex play. Xavier Legette, kind of more for 10 to 12-man leagues. If he's still floating out there on waivers, I love adding him as a stash, and I think he's a solid play this week. With Deontay Johnson dealing with his own injuries, Adam Thielen on IR. Jalen Tolbert. So Brandon Cooks is now dealing with an injury in his knee. He has some kind of infection from a surgery that he had, like a cleanup thing. So he's probably going to miss some time. Jalen Tolbert was my Kyron Williams of wide receivers in Dynasty. I drafted him because he was a character guy. He's the type of guy that just shows up, works hard, doesn't talk. He's not a diva. Like, he's a good character guy. And, the breakout for those guys can take longer. You saw it with Kyron Williams, was irrelevant for his rookie season. Now is, one of the top 10 running backs in the NFL. So I think not that Jalen Tolbert is going to have some crazy breakout, but he's been slowly getting more and more involved in the offense. We saw a couple of weeks ago he had a decent game. I think if it's really just him as the only other wide receiver, like, it's got to go somewhere besides Lamb and Ferguson on every play. I do think Jalen Tolbert can pick up a little bit of that slack. And then I mentioned again, super, super, super deep. If you really need a play, I think Greg Dortch. If San Francisco gets up on the Cardinals, I think Kyler Murray is going to be looking for that outlet. I think the Dortch is that outlet. For tight end, Colby Parkinson, Cade Otton, and Jawan Johnson are your candidates to get you a whole 8 points. Again, those are the guys where it's like, if I have nobody because I have injuries, I would play those guys. But if I have Mark Andrews, I will play Mark Andrews over every one of those guys. And if they get 5 points and Mark Andrews gets 0, I'm not going to be mad at myself unless I lose by less than 5 points. Then I'll be a little upset. For streaming defense, we talked about the Seattle Seahawks against the Giants because they're going to be missing Neighbors and Singletary. That's a smash. Patriots versus the Dolphins, myopic quarterbacks. That's a pretty solid play. The Commanders, their defense has been getting a little bit better, I think, against Cleveland. I mean, they held the Cardinals to 14 points last week. I think Cleveland's been struggling on offense, not just like struggling, but like with their attitudes and everything too, because of outside factors, I think has been a struggle. And then the Raiders and Denver Broncos. So if none of those teams are available and you're looking at, I just need to play this week, Raiders and Broncos. I don't care which one you take. I feel like both sides of the ball, both defenses should be good. So you pick which team you like better and you take their defense. And then kickers are people too. If you need a kicker out there, Chris Boswell for the Pittsburgh Steelers against Dallas, that should be a solid play. Matt Gay at Jacksonville Jaguars, again, assuming Flacco is in for the Colts, maybe sees some more opportunities. And if you want to get in on tonight's game, you want to have a reason to watch. You don't have any fantasy players involved in tonight, but you need a kicker. Chase McLaughlin for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's got you. Go pick up McLaughlin. You can play him tonight against Atlanta. Boom. That is it for the streamers, all the masters. We got a couple more questions to hit, and then we're going to get on out of here. Oops, where am I? Okay, sorry. Here we go. I have Wicks, Xavier Legette, and Mooney on the bench. I have CeeDee Lamb, Evans, and Diggs at wide receiver. Robinson and Dobbins, running back, and Brooks and IR. Should I trade Dobbins and Diggs for Mixon? No. I like Joe Mixon a lot, but I think Diggs is undervalued. The fact that someone's trying to get one over on you like this by trading for Stephon Diggs, who's been an excellent wide receiver too. I think Stroud's just going to keep. Stroud doesn't run. Stroud throws. Stroud throws 30 to 50 times a game. Even if Nico Collins sees 15 targets, 15 targets have to go somewhere else. And a lot of them are going to Stephon Diggs. Even last week, the fact that they had that design play where he was the one that was going to throw the ball, and he saw and decided, no, I'm going to run for it because the pass is not open, but this running lane is wide open. That was a smart play, for one, from a veteran wide receiver to not just, the play is designed to throw the ball, but the throw's not open and this huge running lane's open. Let me do that. That's a smart play. And the fact that was designed for him, again, means that he's an important part of this offense. People tried to act like it was going to be that he was going to be relegated. I was like, nah, especially not in his first year, especially in a revenge spot against Buffalo. Love it. And I feel like with J.K. Dobbins is the running back for that team. Gus Bus has been pretty irrelevant. It hasn't been great the last 2 weeks, but Dobbins is still getting the majority of the work. I would keep Dobbins and Diggs here. Again, if I was trading Dobbins and Diggs, I feel like I would want someone a little bit better than Mixon even. And I know Joe Mixon, again, looked amazing week 1, but then it's now he's been dealing with the injuries. And we've seen this with Mixon before, specifically with the ankle. Or no, sorry, I'm thinking of Jonathan Taylor, where Jonathan Taylor was kind of in and out. No, I feel like you're just giving up too much, with, again, dealing with injury. Mixon's probably not available this week. So it's you're trading away also a week of production of Dobbins and Diggs that you probably need this week potentially in your lineups. If that Robinson is Brian Robinson, Brian Robinson might not play. If Brian Robinson doesn't play, you're going to want to put Diggs in that spot if it's a flex. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. Hey man, who should I add on the waiver wire? Josh Downs or Trey Tucker? Okay, well, for this week, if Joe Flacco plays, it's Josh Downs, but for rest of season, it's Trey Tucker, because I think we all assume that the Devontae Adams trade is going to happen. As soon as Devontae Adams trade goes through, I like Trey Tucker as a wide receiver 3 flex spot with upside. So for the rest of the season, it's Trey Tucker. If you just need to play this week, though, and you think, I think that it's going to be Flacco, then I would go with Downs. But I would say 8 out of 10 times I'm going Trey Tucker here. Ooh, Sutton is also on my ads, but I think the others are better. Actually, I actually think Cortland Sutton is the better player out of all of them in terms of just a pure Robitussin player. He's the one that's going to get them. He's the wide receiver 1 for his team, as gross as it is for Bo Nix and the Broncos. But I do really like Trey Tucker. I think I have just barely Sutton and Trey Tucker. Yeah, just barely Sutton and then Tucker and then Downs. CD for Addison, DK, and CMC. Holy shit. Yeah, I would do that. Yeah, I would do that. Look, CeeDee Lamb is the best wide receiver in fantasy football and in the game, but DK Metcalf is 5th right now in fantasy. He's actually, I think, ahead of CeeDee Lamb in terms of fantasy rankings right now. Jordan Addison, very viable as a wide receiver 3 flex spot. That's instant depth. Like I don't think you're taking such a huge step down from CeeDee Lamb to DK Metcalf that you are not getting a massive advantage by gaining Jordan Addison as a potential flex option. And then also the ability to stash CMC on IR. And if CMC comes back in the second half of the season, it's like, that's the risk. The risk is 100%. Does CMC come back? Now, if you were telling me Jordan Addison and CMC, I'd be like, fuck no. But Jordan Addison and DK Metcalf and CMC, okay. Well, now, again, I don't view the step down from CeeDee Lamb to DK Metcalf being as like big as the risk of CMC not coming back, because that's the only way you don't win this trade is if CMC doesn't come back. And even then, it's like you could still potentially win the trade if if Sam Darnold can maintain through the season and Jordan Addison just stays a viable wide receiver 3 and DK keeps doing what he's doing, like you still potentially win the trade just with the wide receivers. And again, if CMC were to come back, like holy fuck. Very rarely would I do something like this, but this is like one of the rare times I would do something like this. Yeah. That's, again, very rare would I do something like that. Tank Dell 2, Dobbins. Oh, this is back to the trade question from Nate earlier. So Tank Dell 2, Dobbins on by made me consider it. And his underperforming lately, I grabbed Trey Sermon. Yeah. And it's Bijan. Well, if it's Bijan Robinson, you should have him as in your running back spot. Make sure you switch him out of your flex so that if you do need the flexibility, you can play either a running back or wide receiver in that spot. You should always put your Thursday players in the running back or wide receiver spot, depending which one they are. Just gives you a little bit more flexibility. It's not that big of a deal, but just a heads up. And it said auto again. Yeah. Again, if now that I know you have Bijan, though, that means your running backs are even better. So yeah, I'm not trading away Dobbins and Diggs for Mixon right now. It's too much depth given all the injuries we've seen with just the NFL in general right now. And it's a fucking minefield out here. You want to just have the depth to be able to make it through. All right. That's it for me. Thank you guys so much for jumping in with all your questions and for watching. Make sure you super kick that subscribe and like button. Really helps out the show. I don't do sponsors or ads or any of that bullshit. So again, I'm dependent on you guys out there. So again, super appreciate you guys for stopping in. Sunday morning, we'll be back 9 a.m. answering your last minute start sit questions, all that good stuff for fantasy football. But until the next time, I'll catch all of you guys on the flip side.
He's running down the middle by the 50. He's at the 30. He's bare-chested and banging his chest. Now he runs the opposite way. He runs at the 50. He runs at the 40. The guy is drunk, but there he goes. The 20. They're chasing him. They're not going to get him. Waving his arms, bare-chested. Somebody stop that man. Here comes